What kind of mother destroys her entire family for a fling with someone young enough to be her child? You're about to discover the shocking story of a woman who threw away decades of marriage, shattered her children's trust, and left a trail of devastation. All for an affair with a youngster who was closer to her daughter's age than her own. If you've ever wondered how far someone can fall when lust takes over their judgment, this story will leave you speechless. Because what happens next isn't just betrayal, it's complete family annihilation.
Before we start, show devotion by wickedly smacking the like button.
Warning. The following story will be upsetting to cheaters. I sat in the sterile chill of the hospital room, staring at my mom's bed. The harsh reality of our family's destruction hit me like a wave. Just weeks ago, we were whole. Now, Dad's in a camper with someone new and Mom's lost everything. I couldn't process how we got here. 38 years of marriage, gone in a flash. I'm caught in the middle, desperately wanting to fix this mess, but feeling helpless. The shock of what Mom did still lingers. How could she risk it all for a fling with a guy half her age? I never imagined our family could crumble so fast, leaving me to pick up the pieces. One day, we were the picture-perfect family, and the next, our world shattered into a million pieces. Looking back, I can see the signs now, but at the time, we were all too blind to notice. My parents had been married for 38 years. 38 years of love, laughter, and building a life together. How could my mom throw it all away for a fling? It still doesn't make sense to me, no matter how many times I replay it in my head. We were always the family everyone envied. Dad had a successful career, Mom volunteered at the local animal shelter, and I was doing well in my job. We had our beautiful riverside home, filled with memories and love. I just moved out to my own smaller place, alone. Family dinners were a weekly tradition, full of jokes and catching up on each other's lives. We thought we had it all figured out. But then, something changed. It was subtle at first, so subtle that we barely noticed. Mom started acting different. She became distant, not just from Dad, but from me too. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore, and she seemed distracted all the time. We all chalked it up to pandemic stress. After all, everyone was going through a tough time, right? Dad noticed the changes too. I remember him asking me one day, "Is your mother okay? She seems off." I assured him it was probably nothing. We both wanted to believe that so badly. The last family dinner we had before everything imploded is etched in my memory. It was a warm Sunday evening, and I had driven over to their house like I always did. Mom had made her famous lasagna, but something was off. The atmosphere was tense, uncomfortable in a way it had never been before. Mom kept checking her phone throughout dinner, barely engaging in conversation. Her eyes would dart to the screen every few minutes, and a small smile would play on her lips before she quickly put it away. Dad tried to lighten the mood, cracking jokes and asking about my week, but his efforts fell flat. There was this awkwardness with tension that we couldn't shake. I remember watching Mom push her food around her plate, barely eating. When Dad asked if she was feeling okay, she mumbled something about not being hungry and excused herself from the table. Dad and I exchanged worried glances, but neither of us knew what to say. As I was leaving that night, I hugged Dad tightly. Something in me knew that things were about to change, but I had no idea just how drastically. If I had known, maybe I would have said something different, done something to prevent what was coming. But hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? The next day, my world came crashing down around me. I was at work when my phone rang. It was Dad, and the panic in his voice made my blood run cold. "Your mother's gone," he said, his voice breaking. "She left for errands this morning and never came back. Her phone's off, and I can't reach her anywhere." I rushed over home, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe she had gotten into an accident? Maybe her phone had died and she lost track of time? But deep down, I knew. I knew something was terribly wrong. We called hospitals, we called her friends, we even called the police. But they told us that they had contact with her, so there wasn't anything they could do, and she told the cops that she would call us. But as the hours ticked by with no word from Mom, the reality of the situation began to sink in. She hadn't just disappeared, she had left us. It wasn't until late that night that we got any answers. Mom finally called Dad, her voice cold and distant on the speakerphone. "I need to tell you both something. Meet me at Rosie's diner in 20 minutes. The drive to the diner was excruciating. Dad gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I watched his jaw clench and unclench, wondering what could possibly be going through his mind. Was Mom hurt? In trouble? We pulled into the parking lot and I spotted her car immediately. My stomach churned as we walked inside. Mom was hunched over in a corner booth, her eyes red and puffy. As she opened her mouth to speak, I realized she was gonna fuck everything up. She looked small, almost childlike, as we slid in across from her. The waitress approached, but Dad waved her away. The tension was suffocating. "I've been unfaithful. I'm in love with someone else." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dad's face drained of all color, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if to steady himself. I felt like I was going to be sick. "Who?" Dad managed to choke out. Mom's eyes darted between us, filled with shame and fear. "His name is Jake. He's 28 years old." The shock hit me like a physical blow. 28. This boy, this affair partner, was younger than me. How could my 59-year-old mother fall for someone barely out of college? Pathetic. It felt surreal, like I was trapped in some bizarre nightmare. As the full weight of her filthy confession settled over us, I couldn't help but wonder what had driven her to this point. Mom had always seemed so content, so stable. She volunteered at the animal shelter, hosted book club meetings, and was a great mom. How had she ended up in the arms of a man young enough to be her son? Looking back, I realized there had been signs. The new clothes, the sudden interest in social media like TikTok and Snapchat, the way she'd light up when her phone buzzed with a text. I'd dismissed it all as a midlife crisis, never imagining the dark truth. "How long?" Dad's voice was hollow, devoid of emotion. 3 months, Mom replied, her words barely audible. "It started at the shelter. He was a new volunteer and we just connected." I felt a surge of anger. This wasn't some grand love story, it was a whorish cliché. An older woman, flattered by the attention of a younger man, throwing away decades of marriage for a fleeting thrill. "Did you think about us at all?" I blurted out, unable to contain it. "About Dad? About me?" Mom flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Of course I did. I tried to end it, but Jake..." She trailed off, her eyes filling with fresh tears. I could see it now. Weakness, desperate for some excitement and validation. Mom's not the woman I thought she was. My own mom had just become easy prey for a younger man looking for an ego boost or a sugar mama. The thought made me sick. "What happens now?" Dad asked, his voice firm but trembling slightly. Mom's shoulders slumped. "I don't know. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." As we sat there in that dingy diner booth, the full consequences of Mom's actions began to unfold before us. This wasn't just about a broken marriage, our whole family torn apart because she chose to jump some teenage dirtbag. Mom risked everything, her home, her financial stability, her relationship with us, for a fling with some bozo half her age. The weight of her choices seemed to crush her as she sat there, looking small and broken. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her we'd figure it out together. But another part, a louder, angrier part, wanted her to feel every ounce of pain she'd inflicted on our family. As the waitress approached us again, Dad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "I need some air," he muttered, walking out of the diner without a backward glance. I was left alone with Mom, neither of us knowing what to say. The distance between us felt sickening. There's no normal after this. My mom is for the streets. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. My short, awkward glances were full of disgust. This woman, who I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world, had suddenly become a stranger to me. The mother who had tucked me in at night, cheered at my soccer games, and taught me how to bake cookies was gone. In her place sat a small, broken woman, a cheater. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to understand how she could throw away 38 years of marriage for a fling with someone barely older than me. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the half-empty coffee cups on the table. Mom's voice, small and choked with tears, finally broke the silence. "Sweetie, please, I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt anyone, especially not your father or you." Her words felt hollow, like excuses that couldn't possibly justify what she'd done. I finally looked up at her, and the sight of her tear-stained face only fueled my anger. "How could you, Mom? How could you do this to us? To Dad? Do you have any idea what this is going to do to our family?" She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. The thought of her touch made my skin crawl. This wasn't the mother I knew. This wasn't the woman who had raised me to believe in honesty and loyalty. I felt like I was looking at an imposter wearing my mom's face. "I don't know what came over me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clinking of dishes in the diner. I felt alive for the first time in years. I know it's no excuse, but I didn't think about the consequences. I was selfish, and I'm so sorry. Her apology only made me angrier. Sorry didn't fix this. Sorry didn't erase the image of Dad's face crumpling as she confessed her infidelity. Sorry didn't undo the damage she'd done to our family. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. "I can't do this right now, Mom. I need to check on Dad." Without waiting for a response, I hurried out of the diner, leaving her alone with her guilt and regret. The drive home was a blur. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Dad's truck parked haphazardly, the driver's door still open. I rushed into the house, calling out for him. I found him in the bedroom, methodically packing a suitcase. "Dad," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up at me, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke me. "What are you doing?" "I can't stay here," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. I can't be home. I can't stay in this house. Not with all these memories, not knowing what she's done." I wanted to argue, to beg him to stay, but I knew it was pointless. His decision was made. In the span of a few hours, everything was messed up. The home that had been filled with love and laughter for decades now felt cold and empty. I helped Dad pack, neither of us speaking much. What was there to say? How do you comfort someone whose entire life has just been decimated? As he loaded his suitcase into his truck, he turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I'll call you once I'm settled somewhere," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "I love you, kiddo. This isn't your fault, okay? Don't let your mother's mistakes make you doubt yourself. I'll call you tomorrow." And then he was gone, driving away from the life he had built over nearly 4 decades. I stood in the driveway, watching his taillights disappear into the night, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The next few days were a blur of tears and tension. Mom came home that night, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She tried to talk to me, to explain, but I couldn't bear to hear it. Every time I looked at her, all I could think about was Dad, alone in some motel room, his entire world shattered. Mom spent most of her time crying in her room, the reality of what she'd done finally sinking in. I heard her on the phone, begging Dad to come home, promising it would never happen again. But it was done. I felt like I was grieving the death of us, our family. The home that had once been filled with warmth and love now felt cold and empty. Family photos that used to make me smile now made my heart ache. A week after that fateful night at the diner, Dad called me. His voice sounded tired and resigned. "I've filed for divorce." I can't get past this, honey. I'm sorry." Those words felt like the final nail in the coffin of our family. I hung up the phone and sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the finality of it all. 2 months, I watched my so-regretful mom pack her bags, a mixture of excitement and recklessness in her eyes. She was about to move in with Jake, her 28-year-old boyfriend. At 59, Mom thought she'd found true love again, a passionate romance worth sacrificing everything for. Dad wanted to sell the house after the divorce was finalized, but it couldn't be fast enough for her. So she let Dad buy her out, even before they could settle the divorce. But it would take some months before she could be paid. I wanted to be happy for her, but I couldn't. She was irrational. I felt ashamed because of her, and even more ashamed for her. A nagging feeling in my gut told me this was all going to end badly. I was angry, but more scared. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" I asked, helping her zip up an overstuffed suitcase. She turned to me, her face glowing. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, sweetheart. Jake makes me feel alive again." I bit my tongue, choking back the words I really wanted to say. Instead, I nodded. "I just want you to be happy, Mom." Yes, I said it. I said it, and thinking back, I know it's horseshit. But I didn't want her to leave. Dad left already. He could go, but I stayed home, and now I would be alone. As she drove away from home, I couldn't believe it was real. But what could I do? She was an adult, free to make her own choices, even if those choices killed our family. At first, things seemed to be going well, though. I stayed home. Mom called me every few days, gushing about how wonderful Jake was, how attentive and loving. She talked about romantic dinners, surprise gifts, inside jokes, and more. As if she was talking to a girlfriend instead of her own daughter. She betrayed also. But it sounded so great. It was almost enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work out. But within weeks, the cracks started to show. The first time Mom called me sounding less than ecstatic, I knew something was wrong. "Is everything okay, Mom?" I asked, hearing the hesitation in her voice. She paused for a long moment before answering. "Oh, it's nothing really. Jake and I just had a little disagreement about, well, it doesn't matter. Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. As the days passed, those little disagreements became more frequent. Mom's calls became less about Jake's romantic gestures and more about the tension building between them. One day, about a month after she'd moved in with Jake, Mom called me in tears. He said I should consider getting Botox. He said he doesn't want to be seen with an old lady." My heart broke for her. I knew how insecure Mom had always been about her age, and now Jake was using that insecurity against her. "Mom, you're beautiful just the way you are. If Jake can't see that, it's his loss." But Mom wouldn't hear it. She made excuses for Jake, insisting that he was just looking out for her, wanting her to feel confident. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the need to believe that this relationship was everything she'd hoped it would be. As time went on, Jake's controlling behavior escalated. He criticized Mom's clothes, telling her they were too dust-fashioned. He complained about her cooking, comparing it unfavorably to his mom's cooking. He even started dictating who she could spend time with, growing jealous when she wanted to see her friends or me. There were always excuses when I wanted to meet him. I tried to warn her, to make her see what was happening. "Mom, this isn't healthy," I pleaded during one of our phone calls. "He's isolating you, making you dependent on him." That's not love. But Mom wouldn't listen. "You don't understand," she'd insist. "Jake loves me. He just wants what's best for me." I'm happy, really I am. The arguments between Mom and Jake grew more frequent and intense. Sometimes Mom would call me late at night, her voice trembling as she told me she loved me and that she was sorry for hurting me. Other times, she'd go days without contacting me and I'd be sick with worry. Then one night, everything came crashing down. My phone rang at 2 a.m., jolting me awake. It was Mom, and she was sobbing uncontrollably. "He kicked me out." She choked out between sobs. "Jake kicked me out. I don't know what to do. I don't have anywhere to go." I felt a mixture of anger and annoyance as I listened to her. Jake had been drinking, she said, and they'd gotten into another argument about her age. But this time, instead of just criticizing her, he'd exploded in rage. He'd called her desperate, pathetic, a fool for thinking someone like him could ever truly love someone like her. He said he only kept her around because she was paying for everything. Mom whispered that to me, her voice hollow with shock and pain. He laughed at me, said I was just a desperate old woman he could use for money and fun stuff. In that moment, all of Mom's illusions about her passionate romance came crashing down. She was left with nothing but the cold, hard truth. She'd been used, manipulated, and discarded by a man who never truly cared for her. I wanted to say, "I told you so," but I couldn't bring myself to hurt her more than she was already hurting. Instead, I told her to come to my place immediately. She agreed, but would find a motel for the night and come to me the day after. As I prepared for her to arrive, I thought about how quickly her life had changed. In the span of just a few months, she'd gone from a respected wife and mother to a homeless, heartbroken woman with nothing left but her regrets. That night after she had called me, my mind drifted to Dad. Months had passed with only cryptic text messages from him. Was he okay? Was he eating? The guilt of neglecting him gnawed at me. I wasn't angry at him. I couldn't shake the image of him alone in that cramped camper, drowning in sorrow. But sometimes life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I stared at my phone, hoping for any sign of life from Dad. It had been almost a month since I'd heard his actual voice. The last time we spoke, he sounded so broken, so lost. I kept imagining him curled up in that tiny camper, surrounded by memories of a life that no longer existed. My heart ached for him. I felt like I was betraying him whenever I called with Mom. I called him, he didn't answer. I tried calling again, but it went straight to voicemail. "Dad, it's me. Please call me back. I'm worried about you," I said, my voice cracking. I hung up and sighed, feeling helpless. He was my rock, but that changed too. How could I help him if he wouldn't even talk to me? Just as I was about to put my phone down, it buzzed. My heart leaped, thinking it might be Dad. But it was just a social media notification. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. And there it was, a photo that made my jaw drop. It was Dad, standing on a beach, his arms around a woman I'd never seen before. But what shocked me most was his smile. It wasn't the forced, polite smile I'd seen in recent years. This was a genuine ear-to-ear grin that lit up his whole face. He looked happy. Happier than I'd seen him in years. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was this really my dad? The same man who just a month ago looked like he'd aged a decade overnight? I zoomed in on the photo, studying every detail. Why didn't he tell me this? The woman next to him was close to his age, with kind eyes and a warm smile. They looked comfortable together, like old friends. Without thinking, I hit the call button again. To my surprise, Dad picked up on the second ring. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice lighter than I'd heard it in months. We talked for over an hour. Dad told me about how he'd joined a travel group for divorced seniors, something he'd stumbled upon while researching RV parks. At first, he just wanted to find safe places to park his camper. But then he started chatting with other members, sharing stories and advice. "I met Carol at one of the group meetups," he explained. "We just clicked. She's been through a divorce too, so she understands. We've been traveling together for a couple of weeks now." I listened, amazed at the change in him. He talked about the places they'd visited, the new foods they'd tried. He sounded excited, alive. It was like he'd rediscovered a part of himself that had been buried for years. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Dad admitted. "After your mom, well, I thought that was it for me. But Carol, she's shown me there's still so much to experience in life." I felt a lump in my throat. I was happy for him, truly, but a small part of me felt, I don't know, left behind? Like he was moving on while I was still stuck in the middle of this mess. We agreed to meet for coffee in 3 days, as he would be back. When I saw Dad walk into the cafe, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked younger somehow, more relaxed. He hugged me tight, and I could feel the difference in him. He wasn't the broken man I'd last seen. Over coffee, Dad told me more about his new life. He and Carol had been exploring the country, visiting national parks and small towns they'd always wanted to see. "It's like I'm seeing the world through new eyes," he said, his face animated. I never realized how much I'd been missing, stuck in the same routine for so long. I listened, torn between joy for his happiness and a lingering sadness for what we'd lost. "I'm so glad you're happy, Dad," I said, meaning it. "But don't you miss home sometimes?" Dad's smile faded a little. "Of course I do, sweetheart. I miss our family dinners, our movie nights, but that home doesn't exist anymore. Your mom made sure of that." First time I sensed bitterness in his voice. It was the first time he'd mentioned Mom since we sat down. "Have you talked to her at all?" I asked hesitantly. Dad shook his head. "No, and I don't plan to. What's done is done. I'm focusing on the future now, on building a new life for myself." I nodded, understanding but also feeling the weight of being the bridge between my parents. It was a role I never asked for, but one I couldn't escape. As we said goodbye, Dad hugged me again. "I know this has been hard on you," he said softly. "I'm sorry for shutting you out at first. I just needed time to figure things out." I held on to him tightly, feeling like a little girl again. "I'm just glad you're okay, Dad. More than okay, actually." He pulled back, his eyes twinkling. "I am, aren't I?" Who would have thought? He chuckled, then grew serious. "But don't worry about me anymore, okay? I'm good. Better than good." As I watched him walk away, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief that he was doing well, happiness for his new lease on life, but also a deep sadness. Dad had found himself again, but his transformation made Mom's actions even more painful. She hadn't just destroyed her marriage, she'd robbed herself. The following week, I couldn't shake the image of Dad's newfound happiness, but something in my gut told me our family drama was far from over. Little did I know, Mom's cheating was about to take an even darker turn, one that would leave us all reeling. Mom was staying at my place, and I just got home with groceries. There, I found Mom curled up on the couch, looking pale and sweaty. She mumbled something about not feeling well, but I could tell it was more than just a common cold. Her skin was burning up, and she winced every time she moved. I knew we had to get her to a hospital. The emergency room was crowded and chaotic, but the nurses took one look at Mom and rushed her in. As we waited for the doctor, I held her hand, trying to comfort her. I couldn't help but notice how small and sick she looked. When the doctor finally came in, his face was grim. He asked Mom a series of questions about her recent sexual history, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Mom's voice was barely above a whisper as she admitted to a one-night stand with Jake, her much younger ex-boyfriend. I wasn't going into that there and let it slide. The doctor's expression grew even more serious. After running some tests, the doctor returned with the results. I'll never forget the way my stomach dropped when he said the words, "sexually transmitted disease." Mom had contracted an STD from her affair with Jake, and it had gone untreated for months, causing serious complications. I couldn't believe it. Mom was facing potentially deadly consequences. The doctor explained that she had a high fever and severe abdominal pain, signs that the infection had spread. He mentioned something about a drug-resistant strain, which made the situation even worse. As Mom was wheeled away for more tests, I sat in the waiting room, trying to process everything. How could this have happened? Mom cheated, but still, I remembered her careful and responsible side. But then I remembered reality. She had been reckless with her heart, and now she was paying the price with her body. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, worried phone calls, and sleepless nights. Mom needed strong antibiotics and even surgery to deal with the complications from the untreated STD. I watched as she grew weaker, her body ravaged by the infection and the aggressive treatment. One night, as I sat by her hospital bed, Mom reached out and took my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears as she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I could see the regret etched on her face. I wanted to be angry with her. Part of me wanted to yell and scream about how she had torn our family apart and now was putting us through even more pain. But looking at her, so sick and scared, I couldn't find it in my heart to lash out. Instead, I just held her hand tighter and told her we would get through this together. As the days turned into weeks, Mom slowly began to recover. But the doctor warned us that the infection had taken a toll on her body. Her immune system was weakened, and there was talk of other health issues that might have been triggered by the stress and the STD. The word lupus was mentioned, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I couldn't help but think about how different things might have been if Mom had never had that affair. If she had just talked to Dad about her feelings. If she had sought counseling instead of comfort in the arms of a younger man. Her affair had not only destroyed her marriage, but had now put her life at risk. As I watched Mom struggle to sit up in her hospital bed, I realized that her life would never be the same. There, I thought I'd seen the worst of her affair's consequences, but I was wrong. Now, we faced an even greater challenge, one that would test my limits for forgiveness. Mom's illness forced me to confront my feelings head-on. I couldn't ignore the anger bubbling inside me, but I also couldn't abandon her in that sterile hospital room. Every time I looked at her frail form, I felt a confusing mix of resentment and concern. I felt like punching her, but I wanted to care for her too. I called Dad to let him know about Mom's condition, hoping he'd put aside his hurt and come see her. His response left me cold. "I'm sorry she's sick, but I've moved on with my life," he told me. "Carol and I are in Arizona right now. I can't drop everything to rush back for her. Even if I could, I can't." His words stung, even though I understood. It was hard to reconcile the loving father I knew with this distant version. I wondered if he'd ever truly forgive Mom, or if her cheating had permanently changed him. The hospital social worker suggested family therapy, and I reluctantly agreed. Those first few sessions were excruciating. We sat in a small waiting room talking about what's for dinner first. Then we went into an even smaller room, the therapist's office. Mom would try to speak, and we'd all just stare at the floor. The therapist encouraged us to express our feelings openly. She explained that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It was about letting go of the anger and resentment for my own sake, not necessarily for Mom's. Mom apologized constantly, tears streaming down her face. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please give me another chance. I'll do anything to make this right." Her pleas made me really uncomfortable. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part, still raw from her lies, couldn't offer that reassurance. I mean, it was in the little things, like when she lied to the doctor about it being a one-time thing with an affair partner. She kept doing things like that. Slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild. There were days when I couldn't bear to look at Mom, when the anger just grew. So I stayed longer at work before going to my place or the hospital for visits. But there were also moments that were nice, like when I helped her wash her hair and we joked around. For a brief moment, we were just mother and daughter again. I saw other family members struggled too, like her older sister, my aunt and uncle when they visited her. I never saw them so awkward and distant towards her, even after knowing she cheated. My aunt came in alone too to visit Mom, but sit stiffly by her bed, barely speaking. It broke my heart to see them like that, knowing how close they'd once been. She joined 2 sessions. One day, after a grueling therapy session, my aunt surprised us all. She walked to Mom's bed, took her hand, and said, "I'm not there yet. I will be here for your daughter, but you have to change and prove it to us." Mom burst into tears, and for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. As Mom's health improved, we had to figure out our new normal. Dad agreed to occasional phone calls, well, 2 of them, mostly about practical matters, and in the last, he talked mostly towards me. As Thanksgiving approached, I realized her actions had torn apart more than just our immediate family. We weren't invited together, but I was. It was like the first time people knew she cheated. The family was more aimed towards me and asking about my dad. This was during the time she went to live with her affair partner. Like when I was at a birthday of my little cousin, and there were some comments, but people tried to support me. News of Mom's cheating spread through our extended family like wildfire, especially when she left her young affair partner and caught an STD. First, when people finally started making joking comments, now quickly turned into heated arguments. It was a whole other level. It was my cousin's baby shower, an event that should have been filled with joy. Instead, the air was thick with awkwardness. Mom showed up, eyes red-rimmed and puffy, clutching a carefully wrapped gift. The room fell silent as she entered, and I watched as my aunts exchanged meaningful glances. Throughout the party, Mom sat alone in a corner, thin, looking lost. My cousins, who used to joke around with her and ask her for advice, now kept their distance. I overheard one of them whispering, "Can you believe she had the nerve to show up?" My heart ached for Mom, but a part of me couldn't help but agree. How could she expect everything to be normal after what she'd done? As more weeks passed, the divide in our family grew deeper. Mom found herself excluded from events altogether. Birthday parties, graduations, even casual weekend barbecues. Her name was conspicuously absent from guest lists. I watched helplessly as years of traditions and relationships crumbled. The annual family reunion, a highlight of our summers, was canceled that year. No one could agree on whether Mom should be invited. The impact on my grandparents was particularly heartbreaking. I'll never forget the day I visited Grandma after she learned the news. She sat in her rocking chair crying out loud, saying she raised her better than this and saying she didn't understand why'd she throw her life away like this. I had no answers for her, only shared grief. On Dad's side of the family, the reaction was even more severe. Uncle Jim, once Mom's closest confidant in the family, cut all ties with her. He blocked her number, returned her letters unopened, and made it clear that she was no longer welcome in his home. The last time I saw him, his face was red with anger as he declared, "She's dead to me. She killed my brother's heart, and I'll never forgive her for that." Even simple things like sharing family photos on social media became complicated. I found myself hesitating before posting anything, wondering if including Mom in a picture would upset certain relatives or if excluding her would hurt her feelings. It was exhausting, constantly walking on eggshells and trying to keep everyone happy. The most painful realization was that Mom's one decision had changed the dynamic of our entire family tree. Cousins who grew up as close as siblings now barely spoke, and I felt powerless to do anything. Aunts and uncles who once shared weekly dinners now avoided each other at grocery stores. The weeks following Mom's release from the hospital were a whirlwind of activity. I helped her find a small, one-bedroom apartment in a modest part of town. It was nothing like the spacious home she'd shared with Dad for so many years, but it was a start. I remember the look on her face as we stood in my living room, surrounded by a few boxes of her belongings. She seemed lost, unsure of how to begin this new chapter of her life. I don't even know how to live on my own anymore. I've been part of a couple for so long, I've forgotten who I am by myself. It's sad, but she made her choice. I knew she had to find her own way. I helped her unpack, arranging familiar photos and knickknacks around the apartment to make it feel more like home. As we worked, we talked about her next steps. A job helped her with her resume, which hadn't been touched in decades. It was a stark reminder of how much time had passed since she'd last been in the workforce. After days of searching and applying, Mom landed a part-time position at a local craft superstore. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her a sense of purpose and a much-needed distraction. As the weeks turned into months, I watched Mom slowly get a grip and restart. She joined a support group for divorced women over 50, which became a lifeline for her. Every Tuesday evening, she'd meet with other women who understood exactly what she was going through. They shared stories, offered advice, and provided a shoulder to cry on when needed. "I never thought I'd find myself in this situation," Mom confided in me one day after a group meeting. But being around these women, it helps. They understand the shame, the fear of starting over at our age. We're all learning together. Bit by bit, Mom began to explore interests she'd long forgotten. She took up painting again, something she'd loved in college but had given up when she got married. I'd come over to find her living room transformed into a makeshift art studio, canvases propped up on every available surface. She also started volunteering at the local animal shelter, finding joy in caring for abandoned pets. It was there that she seemed to truly come alive again. "These animals have been through so much," she'd say, cradling a rescued kitten, "but they still have so much love to give." It reminds me that there's always hope, no matter how dark things seem. It could be cope, it could be lies. I don't know, but it helped. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. There were still dark days when the weight of her cheating, lies, and the consequences felt overwhelming. I'd get late-night calls, Mom's voice thick with tears as she poured out her regrets and fears, asking about my dating life and trying to micromanage my life. I threw away everything for him. On those nights, all I could do was listen and remind her that she was still loved, still valued. It was a long, slow process, and thinking back, it took so much energy from me and brought me so much negativity. As the months passed, I could live my life more and more. It helped that she was finding a kind of peace with her new reality. She was learning to be independent for the first time in decades, to make decisions for herself and live with the consequences. Listen up, you disgustingly loyal viewers. You're still watching Royal A.I? Even after I've been gone for a bit. I wasn't able to upload due to reasons too personal to share, but finally, I'm blessed to be able to do so again. Well, some good news then. I'm back to stay. I'll try some new things out and hope you'll like it. Please be patient with any errors or mistakes. My main goal stays the same, bringing you the best stories. See you in the next one.